Hi and welcome back to part 5 of this video series. Today we're going to make it possible to show a list of invoices on the dashboard and also go into the detail view. First you need to create a new Django app and a model for the invoices. So if I just go down here to the terminal and create a new folder, mkdir apps/invoice, which is the name of the Django app, and then I run the code to actually create it, python manager py start app, and then invoice, and then the location, apps/invoice. Great, so now I should be able to find it here somewhere. Invoice the apps, invoice, and models.py. So first I want to import the user object from django.contrib.auth.models import user. And here I want references to both the client and the team, so I need to import those two models as well. From apps.client.models import client, and from apps.team.models import team. And then I can create the model for the invoice class invoice, pass in models.model. First I want to create two different variables here, invoice and credit note. These are two choices you have to choose between when you create a new invoice, if it is an invoice or a credit note for an invoice. And I also need to create a tuple, so you can choose between this, invoice and invoice, which will be the label that shows in the form. And then credit note. And the reason why I use this instead of, for example, a number or something similar is that it's easier to remember this in the front end. And when you see credit note, you know that it is a credit note and not just 2, for example. The first field I want here is the invoice number, which defaults to 1. And this is an integer field. And then I have a bunch of char fields that are related to the client. Name, email, organization number, address, zip code, place, country, the contact person, and contact reference. The reason why I hard code it or create char fields for this is that when you first have created an invoice, I don't want it to be possible to change the client in case there are any rules or something in your country that doesn't allow this. So when you first have created an invoice, the information is stored like this. But I will create a reference to the client as well, so you know which invoice this belonged to. And I want a sender reference, so I can add a reference on my invoices, so they know what they should pay for. And then I add a new field, invoice type, which is a char field, and set the max length to 20. Here I add a new attribute called choices, and pass in choices type, which is this. So this will be a select list, so we can choose between invoice and credit note. And I set the default to invoice. And then a new integer field called due days with the default of 14. And this is the number of days from you send it until the client has to pay it. And one more field is credit for. This is only filled out if it is a credit note. And then you have a foreign key back to yourself. And you have the normal models cascade, and this doesn't have to be filled out. And I also add a boolean field called isSent, set this default to false. This will change to true when we send this to the client. And then I add 4 new fields. This is decimal fields with 6 digits and 2 decimal places. This is the best types of field used for prices. The gross amount is the total amount for the whole invoice. The VAT amount is the taxes, or how much you pay in tax. The net amount is the gross amount without the VAT amount. And discount amount is if you add discount to the invoice. And then add a new foreign key, which is just a reference to the team and the related name invoices. So it's easy to get all the invoices for a certain team. And I also had a foreign key to the client and the related name, also invoices. So this will be the reference between the client and the invoices. And when you create a new invoice, I will get information from this client and pass it in here, but you can't change it once you have sent when this has changed to true. And I create 2 more fields, created by and modified by. So I know who created it and who modified it. The related name here is created invoices and modified invoices. And then 2 last fields for this model is created at and modified at. The created at will be automatically filled out when we add something, or when we add this object. And this will automatically be set to now when we change it. So we don't have to think more about this for now, we just know that they are there. So if I now save, you can update the database, Python manage.py, make migrations. No detection detected. That's because I haven't added the new app to settings.py. So here I need to edit apps.invoice. You don't have to have this alphabetically, I just like to do that so it's easier to find them in the list. So if I now try again, yes, now it will create a new model called invoice, Python manage.py, migrate, just to run it. And I also want one more model for the items that you have on the invoice. So class invoice models.model. First I add a foreign key, which is just a reference up to the invoice. This is item, sorry. And related name it items. That means that it's easy to get all items for this invoice. Then I add a simple char field for the title, so you can specify what the item is. For example, web development or server rental and similar. Then add a quantity, which is an integer field, which defaults to 1. And then the unit price, which is a new decimal field, and this is the price for the item. And we have one more, net amount, which is the unit price multiplied with quantity. And then you have the watt rate. In Norway we have, I think it's 10, 14 and 20% watt. I don't know what it is in your country, but it's supposed to be easy to specify this. And then one more discount, which is also an integer field. I set this default to 0. So this will be in percentage, like if you want to give 50% discount, you just specify 50 in the front end when we create the item. Then I can update the database again. Perfect. So now I can run the server, so I have it running in the background. And I can set the first task here to done. Next now is to create a page for showing the list of invoices. But before I do that, it's nice to have some data in the database. So I will go into the database or admin interface. So I can create a few invoices. I need to register it here first. So I just find it here. Invoice admin.py. From .models import invoice and item. Admin.site register invoice and admin.site register item. Save, refresh, and now they appeared here. So let's create one invoice number 1, and client name is the client email. Just add some random things here just so we have something to show. Invoice type can be that it's not sent. I just set some random numbers just so we have an invoice in the database. My team client is that one, created by code and modified by code with code, and save. So now we have an invoice in the database we can get and show in the list here. So then we can go into the invoice here and create a new serializer. Serializer.py, just like with the clients and the team. First I import serializers from REST framework. And then I import the model we just created from .models import invoice, and I also want the item. And then I create the invoice serializer class and pass in serializers.model_serializer. Then add the class meta and specify which model to use, which is the invoice model, of course. And I have 5 read-only fields because I don't want to make it possible to change any of these 5 in the front end. And I also have a long list of data I want to get. It's the ID, the client name, email, and all the other fields, the references, and all the other fields we added. Almost all of them at least. And then I can just save this and go into views.py. Remove all of this. Before I continue, I just want to say thanks to my Patreons. If you too want to support me, you will find a link to my Patreon in the description below. First import the view sets, and from .serializers import invoice serializer, and from .models import invoice and item. I will come back to the item when we go into the detail page of the invoices. And I also want a permission denied class. Then I can create a new class, invoice viewset, and pass in this again. First I specify which serializer class I use, which is the invoice serializer. And then the query set equals invoice.objects.all. And then I need to override the get query set again. Like that. So it's very similar to the other, or identically to be totally accurate. And then the perform create will be a little bit different, because here I first need to get all of the teams, but I just select the first one, but a user will only have one team, so this is the okay way to do it. The reason why I use teams and not the one-to-one key, which will make this a little bit simpler, is if a user in the later part should be able to have multiple teams. Then I can just say serializer.save created by equals self.request.user and set the team to the one we get here. And the perform update is similar or identically to the other Django apps as well. So then we can save this. And next step now is to create a new URLs file, urls.py. First I import path and include from django.urls. Then I import the default router, and from .views import invoice viewset, and I create a new router, and I register the invoices and invoice viewset. Then I create the URL patterns, like that. Then I can save this. And then I just need to go into the main urls.py file and make a copy of this and replace team with invoice and save. So now we should be able to get invoices. Perfect. So then the next step now is to scroll down and find the invoice view, src, views, dashboard, and here I want to create a new file, invoices.view. I can begin with the template and the script, name invoices, and I want to import Axios from Axios, and I want the data function, return, and invoices. This can be an empty list like this. And first add the normal page invoices, and the new div class is multi-line, and in here I want the title class, h1 class title, invoices, close the h1, close the div, and I want one more column. In here I want to show a table class, table, and is full width, so it fills out the whole screen. The t-head, or the header in the table, I want this to include the number, or the invoice number, which client it is, the amount, if it is paid, and in here I want to add actions. Then I want to add an empty T body just so I have it. And then I can save this. So now I want to import this into the router index.js so we can test that everything is working. So first just make a copy of one of these, invoices, invoices.vue. And I can copy the clients. Sorry, I want to take it above. Invoices, invoices, and save. And then the last thing before we can test this is to find the app.vue and make a copy of the clients, invoices, invoices, and save. So if I now go here, I have done an error. Yes, this is not supposed to be TD. It's supposed to be TH. So now I have a new link, invoices, which shows the title and then the header of the table. Perfect. So now we need to make a function for getting the information from the server. Methods. And I also need to go into the mounted lifecycle. And here I call this.getInvoices. And here I create the function getInvoices. Axios.get and then the URL to the Invoices API. Then I get the response back from the server. And in here I want to loop through the response data. So it's very simple, just like this. And every time we loop through this, we call this.invoices and then we push in the response.data in this iteration. And if there are any errors, we just show them in the console. So if I save now and go back, refresh, we don't have anything here. Okay, that's because we haven't added it to the table here yet. So in here I need to create a new element, tr v4 invoice in invoices vbind key invoice.id. Need to take that up there like that. And in here first I say td, then I can just show invoice.id. Now we can go back to the browser and see if it's working. Yes, now it shows number 1, which is the first invoice we created. Perfect. td invoice.client. Hopefully this will show the name of the client. No, it just says 1. Can I say .name? No, I don't have access to it. And the reason why this is because this is a foreign key and we haven't selected all the foreign keys to be part of the data. So I need to come back to that. td invoice.gross amount. td invoice. We didn't add the is paid variable. We need to add that. Sorry, I forgot it. You can copy this. Is paid. Save. And then I need to update the database. Make migrations. Migrate. And run. Great. So now we have the is paid as well. And then I can show it here. Invoice.isPaid. Close this. And then I can add the empty td and save. So now we see the amount, the client's ID, and no information there. And that is, sorry, I messed up again. If I go back to Serializer, if I find the Serializer here, I can add it is paid. Now if I refresh, it said false. Perfect. Okay, since I just want to show the name, I can get the string representation by saying client equals serializers.string related field, and it's already in the list. So if I now save, go back here and refresh, you will see the name of the client instead. Perfect. So now we made it possible to show a list of the invoices we have. And I can set this task to done and save. The next step now is to create a page for showing invoice details. So we can begin with the template. So if I just find invoices here, I can create a little copy of this, create a new file, invoice, and here I want to show invoice number. Now I can close this div, and this template, and script import Axios from Axios, and export default name is invoice. Script like that. Then I save it as invoice.vue. I can import it to the router, so we have it here. Just copy this, remove the S, and that's okay. Then we just need to copy this, add the :id, /:id, so we have the ID for the invoice, and save. And then I just want to go into invoices and create a link here. Router link. I need to go to the client's page and make a copy of this link because I don't remember the syntax right now. Like that. So this is supposed to be invoice and invoice.id. Button is light, details. If I save now and go back here, okay, maybe it shouldn't be a button. I can remove the class. So it just says details. And if I click it, there's a problem because invoice number is not defined. No, sorry. Of course, I need to add the data function first. Return. And invoice can be an empty object. If I now save, go back and refresh, there are no errors. And now it's time to get this information from the database. So here I need to go into the mounted lifecycle, but here I need to use the async method, mounted, because first I need to get the information about the invoice and then I get the items. So here I say await this.get invoice, methods, get invoice, and then I can go back to the client.view because the get function is very similar. So just copy all of this and paste it here. Replace this with invoice ID like that, and invoices, and this dot invoice equals response.data. So if I now refresh, it should work, but it doesn't. Console.log, just check if the data is actually coming here. Yes. Console.log response. And I get the response in the data. So why isn't this working? This.invoice equals response.data. Okay, I think it is because if I go up to the serializer, there are no invoice number here. So I can copy it from there and just show it here like that. And I don't want to change this, so I can add it there as well. So if I now refresh, you'll see 1, invoice 1. Perfect. So then we get the invoice from the database and I can show a little bit more information about it. Okay, so now I want to get the item information. So await this.get items. And then I need to do a little bit in the backend first. So if I go back here now and up to serializers, I need to make a copy of this. Scroll down, just paste it, rename it to item serializer, class meta, and in here is a model equals item, which we got up here, and the read-only fields here is just invoice. Remember to add a comma here since this is a tuple. And the fields I want to get is ID, the title, oops, so it must be a comma, and quantity, unit, price, the net amount, the watt rate, and the discount. Save. Then I can copy this name and go to the views.py and import it up here as well. Then I need to create a new in new viewset class item viewset viewsets.model viewset. The serializer class to use here is of course the item serializer, and the query set equals item.object.all, and then I need to override the get query set, so def get query set self, and in here I want to get the invoice ID from the get parameter, and then I want to use this to get the correct items. So here I need to say return self.queryset.filter invoice ID equals invoice ID. So then we'll get the items based on the invoice ID. Now we can save this for now, and hopefully this will work. And now copy this, go to urls.py, copy those, copy this line, paste it, items, replace, item viewset, and save. So now I think everything in the backend should be okay. When I go back to invoice.view, I need to create this function. So here I also want to get this, and here I need to call axios.get, and I just say /API/v1/items, and the items I want to get should only come from invoice ID equals $. I need to use these here, so I can add a variable here, invoice ID, like that. So now I get items based on this parameter, and then I get a response back, and I can set this dot items equals response dot data. I think I can do that. I will test. And I can add this sketch, and I just need to create this list up here, or array, like that. And then below here I can create div class column is 12, h3 class is size 4 items, h3, div class item, and then v, to add this on a new line, v4 item in items, we bind key item.id, and here I can just show the item.title just to see if it's working. Close the div, and save. There are no items now because we haven't added any to the database yet. So if I just go back here, create one new item, I want to connect it to this invoice. The first item to 100, and the net amount is 200. no VAT and no discount, and save. So hopefully if I refresh now, I will see the first item. Perfect. So that means that everything here is now working. This should probably be a simple table. So I can create one by saying table class table is full width, thead, tr, td. Then we can show the ID of the item, td title, and then the amount, td quantity. Like that. We can show more if we want to later. Thead, tbody. And now instead of calling this a div, we say tr, close the tr, close the tbody, and close the table. You can remove the class as well actually. And then we say td item.id, close this, td item.title, td item.net no quantity, supposed to be lowercase, td item.net amount, like that. So now we have a little bit more information about the content. And then what's left is getting the information about the client. Actually, there are more that need to be done here, like much more information, but that's the last thing we want to do in this part. So I can copy this title, client, and I want it to be similar to this code. So here I should be able to say invoice.client.name, hopefully soon. A lot of replacing or pasting here. Save. And this will not show because we don't have access to invoice.client yet. I think if I just change this to a hyperlinked related field and save. Okay, I get some errors here. The view name argument is required. So I need to set view name equals client detail and save. If I now refresh, there is definitely something wrong going on here. Just stop the server, start it again. Okay, the relational field must provide a query set. Okay, so I did a mistake because I'm not supposed to reference the client here. You're just supposed to say client underscore, because this is the information that they're going to have connected to the invoice and not the client object. So if I just do this and there, refresh, and now I get a little bit information about the client. There are not much information about that client because it haven't been added to the invoice yet. But everything should be okay now. If I just go in here, edit this one, address 1, address 2, zip, place, and Norway. Save changes. So now this have much more information. And if I go to the back end now, create a new invoice. Invoice 2, the client, blah blah blah. And this will automatically be filled out by the front end or Django when we create from the front end. Address 1, place, Norway, like that. So if I now just 0, Set this to my theme, same client, and the same creator and modified. If I now go back here to invoices, you'll see that I have 2. And if I go into details on this one, you'll see much more information here. Perfect. I don't like that the newest invoice is at the bottom, so I want to change this. To do that, I need to go into the models.py. There. And here I want to say class meta ordering equals create a tuple minus created at and a comma since it's a tuple. I say minus because I want it in descending order. Refresh, and now the newest one is on top. Perfect. And that was it for this part. And in the next part of this series, I want to make it possible to add invoices from the front end here. If you have any questions about the progress so far, feel free to leave a comment below and I'll answer as soon as I can. See you in the next video.